You guys tied it up at 95. There's about 3 minutes to go, and then they scored almost every trip down.
The Indiana Fever lose to the Atlanta Dream in one of the most infuriating, confusing, and frankly suspicious games of the entire NBA season. And when I say suspicious, I mean the officiating, I mean the coaching decisions, I mean the entire environment around Caitlin Clark every single time she touched the ball. This was not a game the Fever lost, because the Dream outplayed them at every turn. This was a game that slipped away through a combination of bad calls, baffling rotations, and decisions from the sideline that left every Fever fan watching at home absolutely speechless. Let me tell you what I was watching every time Caitlin Clark had the ball. She drives toward the basket, someone grabs her arm on the way up. Nothing. She catches on the wing, gets bumped from behind before she can even get into her shooting motion. Nothing. She comes off a ball screen and takes a forearm right to the ribs. Nothing. But the moment Atlanta is on the receiving end of any contact that could remotely be interpreted as a foul, the officials are right there with the whistle before the play even finishes. That is not consistent officiating. That is a different standard being applied to the most watched player in this league, and it is happening in plain sight on national television. The broadcast team was expressing confusion about calls in real time. The commentators were stumbling over explanations for whistles they clearly could not justify. When the people whose entire job is to present this league favorably cannot defend what the officials are doing, that tells you exactly how bad it was tonight. And here is the result of that officiating. Caitlin Clark finishes the game with 5 fouls. 5 fouls on the player who was absorbing physical contact on the vast majority of her offensive possessions. She ends up in foul trouble. She spends crucial minutes on the bench in the fourth quarter. The offense completely falls apart without her. 0 meaningful whistles protecting Caitlin Clark. 5 fouls called against Caitlin Clark. That is what fair and consistent officiating look like in this game, and it is a problem that goes well beyond one night. Here is what consistency would actually look like. It would mean that when Caitlin Clark drives into the lane and gets her shooting arm grabbed, that is a foul. When she sets her feet on the perimeter and absorbs a forearm to the body, that is a foul. When she is in the act of shooting and gets bumped off her line, that is a foul. These are not close calls. These are not judgment situations that require slow motion replay. These are routine basketball fouls that would be called for any other player on that court. The issue is not that officials are missing difficult situations. The issue is that they are choosing not to call clear situations when Caitlin Clark is the one being fouled. That choice has consequences. It allows opposing teams to build an entire defensive strategy around physicality because they know they will not be penalized for it. And it sends a message to every team in this league about what is permissible against the most popular player in professional women's basketball right now. But the officiating only tells part of this story. Stephanie White had every tool available to fight back against these calls and chose not to use them. The challenge system exists for exactly these situations. You watch a wrong call happen right in front of your bench, a call that is going to put your franchise player in foul trouble, and you challenge it. You stand up. You make the officials answer for the call. You fight for your player, because that is what head coaches are supposed to do. Stephanie White did not do that tonight. Multiple calls that should have been challenged. Multiple opportunities to protect Caitlin Clark from accumulating those fouls. Multiple moments where a coach needed to step in and nothing happened. Whether that is a failure of attention, a failure of preparation, or a failure of philosophy, I genuinely cannot say. What I can say is that it is not good enough. And somebody else on that staff has to speak up too. Brianne January is standing right there on that sideline. She is watching every one of these calls happen in real time. At some point, somebody on that bench has to demand that a challenge gets used. Somebody has to advocate for Caitlin Clark when the officiating is clearly running against her. That is what a coaching staff is supposed to provide. That accountability cannot rest with the head coach alone if the entire staff is witnessing the same thing and staying quiet. If you're following this Fever situation and you want to stay on top of every game, every coaching decision, and every development as this season unfolds, make sure you're subscribed right now. We cover all of it here, and you do not want to miss what comes next. Now let's get into the fourth quarter, because this is where things went from frustrating to genuinely indefensible. Caitlin Clark enters the fourth with 26 points and 7 assists. That is an elite performance across 3 quarters of a basketball game. She gave her team everything they needed. She did her job at the highest possible level. Stephanie White sits her down because of foul trouble. I understand the thinking. You have a player with 5 fouls, and you are trying to protect her from fouling out of a tight game. That is a reasonable coaching instinct. Here is where that reasoning stops holding up. Stephanie White waits until barely 3 minutes remain on the clock to put Clark back in. Not 6 minutes. Not 5 minutes with genuine time to make an impact. 3 minutes. The game is essentially determined at that point. What exactly was the plan for those 8 or 9 minutes on the bench? Because the offense generated nothing. The Fever could not score. They could not run their sets. They needed their best player, and she was sitting on the sideline watching the lead disappear possession by possession. There was a specific moment in this game that I keep coming back to. The score was tied at 95 with about 3 minutes remaining. The game was right there. Everything the Fever needed was still available to them. And then Atlanta went on a run, scoring on almost every single possession down the stretch, while Indiana could not respond. The Dream got into the paint, got to the free throw line, converted, the Fever turned it over, gave up transition chances, and fell apart in the moments when execution had to be at its absolute highest. That stretch, going from a tied game to a defeat in just a few possessions, is not purely an officiating story. That is a late-game execution failure. That is a team without the defensive discipline or the offensive clarity to close games when it counts. Stephanie White in the postgame acknowledged that the team let the Dream get too comfortable, that they were not forcing enough difficult shots, that rotations broke down and gave Atlanta clean looks. Acknowledging the problem and actually fixing the problem are two very different things. And right now, only one of those appears to be happening. And when Clark finally comes back onto the floor in those final minutes, the offense does not run through her. She is standing off the ball. She is watching other players handle. She does not attempt a single additional shot for the rest of the game. She finishes with the exact same 26 points and 7 assists she had entering the fourth quarter, not because she stopped performing, but because she was never given the opportunity to add to them. The most dangerous offensive player on the court, the one every team in this league designs defensive schemes specifically to slow down, goes an entire fourth quarter without taking a shot. That is not circumstance. That is a failure of coaching that is difficult to characterize as anything other than malpractice. And while all of this is happening, look at who Stephanie White is actually deploying. Monique Billings came in this offseason with real expectations attached. Real investment went into bringing her to this roster. Real importance was placed on what she could contribute in critical game moments. In the fourth quarter of a tight game the Fever desperately needed to win, she is not on the floor. She cannot stay in the game during the sequences that decide outcomes. If you construct your roster planning around a player's availability in big moments, she has to actually be available in big moments. That is the entire premise. And Michaela Timpson ends up playing significant fourth quarter minutes instead. I want to be completely clear about this, because it matters. None of what follows is a criticism of Michaela Timpson as a player or as a person. She is a young player working hard and developing her game. The problem is not hers. The problem belongs entirely to the people who created a situation where she is being asked to carry weight that more experienced players should be handling. That falls on the coaching staff. That falls on the front office. Stephanie White and Amber Cox put this team in this position, and they have to own what comes from it. Speaking of Amber Cox in the front office, the roster construction decisions deserve real scrutiny right now. Raven Johnson was selected 9th overall in the draft. Organizations do not take players 9th overall because they plan to use them sparingly and see what develops. You make that pick because you have a vision, a plan, a genuine commitment to that player's development and role within your system. Raven Johnson is barely getting consistent minutes. When she does see the floor, it is not in defined roles with a clear development philosophy behind it. You cannot invest a top 10 selection and then provide neither the minutes nor the structure for that investment to mean anything. That is a front office problem that needs to be addressed directly and soon. And then after the game was over, I'm watching footage from the court, and I see players smiling and laughing, walking off that floor like the result was something to absorb and move past immediately with no visible weight to it. I understand that athletes are trained to maintain composure. I understand that people handle disappointment differently. But there is a meaningful difference between professionalism and appearing genuinely unbothered. The fans who drove to that arena, who watched every possession, who felt every bad call and every wasted opportunity in their chest, they are not smiling right now. They are angry and confused and disappointed. That disconnect between what the fan base is experiencing and what the team appears to be projecting in those post-game moments is not a small thing. That is a culture question, and somebody inside that building needs to ask it out loud. Let's look at what Atlanta actually did on the floor, because the defensive numbers compound every other frustration. The Dream scored 60 points in the paint. 60. They generated 17 fast break points. Their players shot better than 50% across the roster. That is not one team catching fire for a single night. That is a defensive system being exposed and picked apart in multiple ways simultaneously. The Fever gave up transition baskets because guards were not applying enough pressure to force resets. They gave up interior points because rotations arrived late. They surrendered second-chance opportunities because the defensive glass was not a priority. These are not new problems being encountered for the first time. These are the same breakdowns that have shown up in this team's losses throughout the season, and they have not been corrected. What makes all of this so genuinely painful is what Caitlin Clark keeps producing despite everything around her. She shows up every single night. She absorbs the contact. She deals with the officiating inconsistencies without making it a public spectacle. She posts elite numbers in a losing effort and comes to the post-game podium composed and thoughtful when most players in her position would be visibly furious. She deserves a coaching staff that builds the offense around what she brings. She deserves a front office that constructs a coherent roster around her and around Aaliyah Boston. She deserves officials who apply the same rules to her that they apply to every other player on the court. Right now, none of those things are happening with any real consistency, and the results speak for themselves. Aaliyah Boston deserves better in this situation too. She is a committed, talented player who keeps being put in position after position where success is nearly impossible because the infrastructure around her is failing. Both she and Clark are performing at a level the team's record does not reflect, and that gap between individual output and collective outcome is exactly where the accountability needs to live. The Indiana Fever have real talent. They have a generational player. They have pieces that should allow them to compete. And yet here we are having the exact same conversation, asking the exact same questions, watching the exact same patterns repeat. The coaching decisions are not working. The roster has real holes in critical moments. The officiating is not protecting the most visible player in the league. The culture inside that locker room needs hard questions asked of it. Until this organization confronts these things directly and commits to making real changes, fans are going to keep watching elite individual performances get wasted in team losses. That is not acceptable. Stay subscribed because we are going to be right here holding this team accountable every step of the way, and this season still has a great deal left to answer for.